From losing his faith, to teaming up with Homer as a bounty hunter, to even getting tangled with the mob. These are 10 of Ned Flanders' best moments ever. Imagine being Ned Flanders. You've lived your whole life as Springfield's most devoted Christian, built your entire identity around raising God-fearing children, and then one day, your son wakes up and says he doesn't believe in God anymore. That's exactly what happens to Ned in one of his most heartbreaking episodes. It all begins when Todd, still grieving the loss of his mom, admits he can't even remember her face anymore. That loss shakes his faith to the core, and when Ned tries to comfort him, Todd lashes out. At church, things get even darker when asked what he'd say to Jesus if he met him. Todd mutters, "Thanks for nothing." The camera cuts to Ned and he just faints. Honestly, fainting might have been the best way to handle that moment. But Ned, being Ned, he doesn't stop to talk it out. Instead, he goes straight to punishment. The next morning, when Todd refuses to say amen at the breakfast prayer, Ned actually wonders how he could punish his son into believing again. His solution: to send Todd to live with the worst role models possible, the Simpsons. And he doesn't just drop him off like a normal dad. No, Ned goes full exorcist on his own kid, shouting, "Todd Flanders, I cast thee out." Talk about Christian parenting Springfield style. While living with the Simpsons, things don't get much better. Lisa tries to convert Todd to Buddhism. Homer just wants him out of the house so he can get back to his love life, and Bart decides to tempt him with the joys of a godless life. None of it works. Todd is unmoved, and for Ned, that failure cuts deep. The lowest moment? Ned sitting in a bar with Homer completely defeated, ordering a drink and muttering, "I'll take one too, I'm losing everything." Seeing Ned Flanders drink was shocking enough, but seeing him bond with Homer over alcohol, that's Springfield-level tragedy. But things turn around in the strangest way possible. After a near-death experience, both Ned and Homer end up in heaven, at least temporarily. When Todd sees his dad in danger, he finally prays, not to God, but for Ned, and that's enough. The episode closes with Ned saying he believes again, because for him, Todd's love is proof that faith still lives in his family. It's raw, emotional, and easily one of Ned's best moments, not because he was perfect, but because he was human. But if losing Todd's faith shook Ned to the core, his next big storyline pushed him into a full-blown crime drama, the kind of story nobody expected Flanders to star in. When you think of Ned Flanders, you probably picture church hymns, Bible study, and constant okely-dokleys. What you don't expect is a full-blown crime drama with kidnappings, shootouts, and moral corruption. But that's exactly what happened in A Serious Flanders, a two-part episode that turned Ned's world completely upside down. It all starts innocently enough. Ned is out in the woods collecting trash like the good neighbor he is, when he stumbles across a bag stuffed with cash. And not just a little pocket change, we're talking $103,000. Most people would pocket it. Homer would definitely pocket it. But Ned, he sees it as a test from God. So he donates the money to a local orphanage, making the gift in his grandfather's name. It should have ended there, but Ned's goodness comes at a cost. Because the money wasn't just lost cash, it belonged to some very dangerous people. A ruthless debt collector comes to Springfield to reclaim it, and suddenly Ned is pulled into a world of violence he's never even imagined. This is where things get dark. The story peels back layers of Ned's family history, revealing that his grandfather wasn't the pure, upstanding man Ned believed. In fact, he was tied to crime, bloodshed, and greed. That revelation rocks Ned's identity, because for him, faith and family have always been his foundation. But the most shocking moment comes when Ned does something unthinkable. He tells a lie. Faced with the impossible choice of saving Homer's life or telling the truth, Ned breaks his lifelong devotion to honesty, and for Ned Flanders, lying feels like damning his soul. The climax plays out like a Coen Brothers movie. Ned and the Collector face off on a frozen lake, guns drawn, hatred boiling over. The ice cracks, chaos erupts, and for a brief moment, Springfield's gentle neighbor looks ready to kill. That's how far he's pushed, to the edge of his morality. And yet, somehow, Ned survives. Not by winning, but by enduring. He comes out of it shaken, scarred, but still standing. It's one of the rare times The Simpsons stripped away the jokes and showed Ned as more than a caricature. Instead, he became the center of a gritty, violent, and deeply human story. For fans, A Serious Flanders wasn't just one of Ned's best episodes. It was proof that even the most righteous man in Springfield can be dragged into the mud. After battling gangsters and facing his darkest side, you'd think Ned would stay far away from anything criminal, but Springfield has a funny way of dragging him back in, and his next adventure put him side by side with Fat Tony himself. It all begins with a streak of terrible luck. Ned has already lost 2 wives, 2 jobs, and now even his faith is starting to wobble. Feeling broken and desperate, he looks for something new to keep himself busy, and of course he turns to his favorite passion project, the Leftorium. But like most small businesses in Springfield, the shop isn't exactly thriving. That's when Fat Tony strolls in, smooth as ever, and offers to help. Ned, being the trusting soul he is, takes him at his word. He Googles Fat Tony and sees the words legitimate businessman. And of course, Ned believes it, because if it's on the internet, it must be true. From there, things spiral. Ned starts spending more time with Springfield's mobsters, completely unaware of the danger he's in. He thinks he's building honest partnerships, but really, he's knee-deep in organized crime. At one point, he even starts to feel like part of the family, which, let's be real, is not something you brag about at Bible study. But the honeymoon phase doesn't last long. Lisa eventually confronts him, telling Ned the truth. These men aren't business partners, they're criminals. When the reality finally sinks in, Ned tries to back out, but as Fat Tony makes very clear, there's only one way out of the mob. The situation gets so bad that Ned finds himself wearing a wire for the government, acting as an informant. Picture it, Springfield's most pious man, secretly working with the feds, sweating bullets while trying to record mob conversations without giving himself away. The irony is almost too much to handle. In the end, Ned barely escapes with his life, but not without leaving a trail of awkward, unforgettable moments behind him. A man who once thought secular music was sinful somehow became a mob informant, only in Springfield. After surviving the mob, you'd think Ned would want some peace and quiet. Instead, his next big moment came during a family vacation, one that turned into a survival test in the middle of the Grand Canyon. When you hear family vacation, you probably think road trips, campfires, and sightseeing. But when the Simpsons and the Flanders families decide to travel together, things are bound to go horribly wrong. And in this case, their trip to the Grand Canyon turned into one of Ned's most memorable adventures. The story is told as a flashback, with Homer tucking Maggie into bed and spinning a wild tale about how the families ended up stranded in the Grand Canyon. Right away, the tone is set. Flanders is his usual polite, church-going self, while the Simpsons are, well, the Simpsons. 10 hours into the drive, Homer finally sees the glorious canyon view, only for it to be ruined when the Flanders family bursts into cheerful church songs. Octopus? Homer shouts. Apparently that's his safe word to block out Ned's relentless piety. Once they arrive, the two families join a guided tour. But in true Springfield fashion, disaster strikes when their tour guide falls off a cliff, leaving them completely lost and without supplies. From there, it's survival mode, and this is where Ned shines. He tries to stay optimistic, leaning on faith and patience. Meanwhile, Homer panics and starts plotting shortcuts to food and shelter. Eventually, the two stumble onto a campsite full of wealthy tourists. Ned insists they ask politely for help, but of course, Homer takes over. "Let's try it my way," he says. And that's when things take a turn. The pair actually steal supplies from the campers, dragging bacon, blankets, and gear back to their families like two hunters returning from the wild. Ned, the man who once refused to jaywalk, now committing straight-up theft, and what's worse, he doesn't even seem to regret it. But the real heart of the episode comes in the quiet moments. Despite their endless differences, Ned and Homer actually bond. Stranded, hungry, and exhausted, they find themselves depending on each other more than ever. For once, Homer admits that maybe Ned isn't just an annoying neighbor. Maybe he's the reason they survived at all. By the time the trip ends, Ned has shown that even in chaos, his faith and determination can carry his family through. But he's also proven he's willing to bend the rules when survival is on the line. It's a rare glimpse at a less perfect Ned, one who's still righteous, but also deeply human. Of course, survival in the wilderness is one thing, but nothing tested Ned's faith more than love. And when Edna Krabappel entered his life, Springfield saw a whole new side of Flanders. It all begins with Bart being Bart. He causes chaos at school, pushes Edna too far, and gets her suspended. For once, Bart feels guilty and tries to make it up to her, helping her sneak out of teacher detention. But when Edna literally falls into Ned's arms, it's love at first sight, or at least Springfield's awkward late-in-life version of it. Their first date is surprisingly sweet. Two widowed souls bonding over loss, loneliness, and the hope of second chances. But Ned being Ned, he's shy, careful, and way too polite. At one point, Edna has to remind him that breaking his own no second entendres on the first date rule might not be the worst idea. For the first time in years, Ned feels alive again. But Springfield is never kind to romance. As word spreads, the town explodes in gossip. And things get worse when every single man in Springfield admits to having dated Edna at some point. Mo, Lenny, comic book guy, even some you'd never expect. The look on Ned's face says it all. He's horrified. The Christian widower suddenly realizing his new love has a, let's say, very colorful past. In true Ned fashion, he considers breaking things off, but then he surprises everyone. Instead of running away, he forgives Edna. In one of the show's most heartfelt twists, Ned acknowledges her past but chooses to focus on the person she is now. It's a rare moment of maturity and vulnerability from Springfield's most uptight man. The story didn't end there. For the first time in Simpsons history, the writers let the audience decide. Viewers voted online to determine whether Ned and Edna would stay together, and overwhelmingly, fans chose to keep them a couple. It was proof that even in his strict moral world, Ned could evolve, and fans wanted to see him happy. Ned and Edna's relationship became one of the most authentic storylines in later seasons. It showed that Flanders wasn't just a joke character or Homer's punchline. He was a man still searching for love, forgiveness, and family after tragedy. But as sweet as their romance was, marriage brought new challenges. And when Ned and Edna started clashing over how to raise the Flanders boys, things got messy fast. Falling in love is one thing. Blending two families together? That's a whole different battle. When Ned and Edna secretly married, it seemed like a dream come true. But in Springfield, even the happiest unions come with chaos. And for Ned, that chaos arrived in the form of parenting clashes. The trouble begins when Edna, a no-nonsense school teacher, tries to modernize the way Ned raises Rod and Todd. For decades, Ned has enforced strict religious rules, Bible verses at bedtime, and King's English diddlies in everyday speech. But Edna sees sheltered, fragile kids who need to toughen up. She pushes them toward the real world, while Ned wants to shield them from it. The first signs of trouble are almost comical. Edna lets the boys get temporary tattoos. She buys Rod flashy sneakers with lights that blink like Times Square. She even considers pulling them out of their private Christian school after realizing it's not teaching them anything practical. For Edna, these are small, necessary changes. For Ned, it's practically blasphemy. The arguments build until they finally explode at a school event. Ned accuses Edna of undermining his parenting, shouting about tattoos, sneakers, and faith. Edna fires back, accusing Ned of being stuck in the past and suffocating his kids with rules. In the heat of the fight, the perfect Christian husband turns red-faced and furious. The crowd watches, stunned, as Ned Flanders loses his cool. But the most fascinating part of this storyline isn't the fight, it's the lesson. That night, Ned crashes at the Simpsons' house, and what he sees shocks him. Marge and Homer fight constantly about how to parent Bart. They disagree on nearly everything: bedtime, discipline, respect. But somehow, their marriage still works. Homer even argues that no couple ever fully agrees on parenting, and while Homer isn't exactly the best example, Ned realizes he has to adapt if his marriage is going to last. The next day, Ned swallows his pride and makes a very public apology to Edna at school. To everyone's surprise, Edna apologizes too, admitting she overstepped. The two reconcile, agreeing to work through their differences as a team. It's messy, imperfect, and surprisingly real. For fans, this moment stood out because it stripped away Ned's cartoonish perfection. For once, he wasn't the flawless Christian dad. He was a man trying to balance tradition, love, and compromise. And in a show built on satire, that glimpse of real-world struggle hit harder than any punchline. But marriage struggles weren't Ned's only adventure. Believe it or not, he once ditched his Bible for a badge, teaming up with Homer to become Springfield's unlikeliest bounty hunter. It starts, as always, with Homer getting arrested, this time at a St. Patrick's Day parade. After being bailed out, he stumbles into a bail bonds office and hears about the money in bounty hunting. Naturally, Homer jumps in, but on his very first job, he nearly gets himself killed trying to capture Snake Jailbird. Snake pulls a gun, Homer freezes, and the trigger is about to be pulled when Ned Flanders suddenly appears. Calm, steady, and completely out of character, Ned talks Snake into surrendering. Homer is stunned. Not only did Ned save his life, but he actually seems good at this. The next day, Homer shows up at Ned's door with an offer they should team up as partners. Ned's reluctant at first, but Homer makes a pitch only Springfield's most polite man would fall for. You're kind and smart, I'm cruel and dumb. Together, we're the perfect team. And for a while, it works. The two open a tiny bounty hunting office, complete with Ned's prayers before every mission. Lord, thank you for creating so many evil criminals for us to bring in. It's hilariously uncomfortable, like watching Sunday school crash into a Tarantino movie. Of course, Homer's recklessness starts to clash with Ned's careful, moral approach. While Ned tries to talk suspects down, Homer charges in with wild stunts and no regard for safety. At one point, Ned even prays for Homer to have a stroke mid-chase just to stop him from causing more damage. Yes, Ned Flanders, the most devout man in Springfield, begging God to drop his best friend on the spot. The partnership reaches its breaking point during a high-speed chase after Fat Tony. Homer drives like a madman, nearly killing both of them, and Ned finally snaps. He quits on the spot, heartbroken that Homer can't respect the responsibility of the job. But things don't end there. Ned is given one last bounty to collect, and it's Homer. Suddenly, the teacher has become the hunter, and his own partner is the target. What follows is a bizarre action movie style showdown, with Ned chasing Homer through the streets of Springfield. At one point, he shouts, "I loved you, man," for the last few weeks, before tackling him into a pit of wet cement. In the end, the two survive, stuck side by side in a block of concrete, with Ned realizing once again that Homer is both his greatest burden and his closest companion. From crime fighting to homeowning, Ned's next big moment came not as a hero, but as a landlord, and unfortunately for him, his tenants were the Simpsons. For years, Ned Flanders has been Homer's punching bag, neighbor, and reluctant friend, but in this storyline, he became something far more surprising: Homer's landlord. And of course, it all started with Homer's reckless spending. The Simpsons throw a massive Mardi Gras party, with the entire town invited, except, naturally, Ned. When Lenny asks Homer how he can afford such extravagance, Homer proudly brags about his magical home equity loan. In classic Homer fashion, he doesn't realize that eventually, loans need to be paid back, so when the bank comes knocking, the Simpsons lose their house. At the foreclosure auction, the family watches in despair as strangers prepare to bid. That's when Ned steps in. Out of sheer kindness, he buys the house himself, not to evict them, but to rent it back so they don't lose their home. It's an act of selflessness only Ned could pull off. In a single moment, he saves the Simpsons from homelessness, proving once again that his heart is bigger than Homer's ego. But if you know Homer, you know what happens next. He takes advantage. Instead of being grateful, he immediately begins abusing Ned's generosity. Every little problem in the house becomes Ned's responsibility. Light bulb out? Call Ned. Leaky faucet? Call Ned. Need a roof fixed at 3 a.m.? Definitely call Ned. Homer even starts treating him like a servant, declaring, "He's like a genie to me." The tension grows until Homer crosses a line. He goes public with his complaints, trying to smear Ned as the worst landlord in Springfield. Keep in mind, Ned is literally charging them minimal rent, fixing their home and saving them from the streets. Only Homer Simpson could spin that into villainy. Eventually, Ned has enough. In one of his rare flashes of anger, he threatens to evict the Simpsons. But Homer, ever the trickster, finds a loophole. If Abe Simpson is listed as the legal tenant, Ned can't throw them out. Ned is cornered once again, forced to watch as Homer rubs the victory in his face. And yet, even after everything, Ned doesn't abandon them. He can't. Because, as frustrating as the Simpsons are, Ned lives by one principle: love thy neighbor, even if your neighbor makes your life a living hell. It's a storyline that shows Ned at his most saintly and his most human. He saves the Simpsons, gets exploited, loses his patience, and still forgives them in the end. For better or worse, Ned Flanders is the ultimate good neighbor. But Springfield wasn't enough for Ned. His faith took him all the way to Israel, and what happened there nearly broke him. If you thought Ned's patience was unshakable, this episode proves otherwise. In fact, it shows the one thing that can finally push him over the edge, trying to make Homer Simpson find God. It begins with Ned inviting the Simpsons on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Israel. His mission? To save Homer's soul by showing him the Holy Land. Marge is flattered, Lisa is excited, and Bart, well, Bart's just along for the ride. But Homer, he has one priority, and it isn't spiritual enlightenment. His first stop in Jerusalem isn't a holy site, it's the buffet. From the very start, Homer mocks everything Ned holds sacred. At the Stations of the Cross, he interrupts with jokes about omelets. At the sacred tomb, he calls it the resting place of the most famous man who ever lived, Porky Pig. Even Ned's patience can't survive lines like that. For Ned, this trip is supposed to be life-changing, proof that even Homer can open his heart to faith. But the more Homer ridicules, the more Ned crumbles. Eventually standing in one of the most sacred sites on Earth, Ned finally snaps. He looks Homer dead in the eye and says the words he never thought he'd say. "You are not worth saving." It's shocking. The devout man who has forgiven Homer countless times finally gives up on him. And yet, irony strikes again. Not long after, Homer wanders into the desert, dehydrated and delirious, and hallucinates that he's the Messiah. Yes, Homer Simpson becomes convinced he's been chosen to unite all faiths. And somehow, it works. In his rambling, ridiculous way, Homer actually inspires Ned. His message of unity, however clumsy, touches Ned's heart, reminding him that even the most hopeless cases can still bring people together. For Ned, it's a bitter pill. After years of preaching, the one who finally brings him a moment of clarity is Homer. It's not Ned's proudest moment, but it's one of his best, because it shows that beneath the jokes, his struggles with faith are real. Even the most devout neighbor has limits. And in Israel, we watch Ned Flanders finally reach his breaking point. Ned Flanders has been much more than Homer's overly religious neighbor. His best moments show a man constantly tested, losing his wife, struggling with Todd's faith, clashing with gangsters, even getting drunk at Moe's. Sometimes he's the saint, sometimes he snaps, but he's always human. That's what makes Ned so compelling. Behind the diddly doodlies, he's a character built on contradictions, faithful but doubtful, kind but flawed, forgiving, even when he shouldn't be. Whether he's fainting in church, fighting mobsters, or bonding with Homer in the strangest ways, Ned's story proves he's one of Springfield's most complex characters. Which Flanders moment surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Simpsons Deep Dive.